Welcome back to another episode of our AI Oversimplified series. As always, this session is aiming to oversimplify AI so normal non-nerds can understand it and utilize it in their day-to-day. In the last session, we talked about skills. In the first session, we talked about what they were and how, overall, in an oversimplified way, they were connected. And today we'll be talking about skills and how they're actually utilized. Because, initially we talked about, the different models that we use and how we can use the best model for the task. But skills are something that, increasingly are being utilized a lot across everywhere. And personally, I'm getting a lot of use out of it. So I think it's the most kind of high value learning at this point that you can get from these sessions. So what skills are? Oh, all right. So we talked about skills. Skills are basic markdown files that have information. So skills have name, description, and instructions on how to do certain tasks. And when you're using your AI or Claude or Claude Code, you have a series of skills that you're currently building on. Now, the good thing about skills is that they're modifiable. They are something that you can kind of keep in the memory and use it whenever you want to, and they don't add too much bloat if utilized correctly. Let me give you a quick context around the whole bloat thing as well, because I think it's important to understand now. With AI models, when you start using it, maybe I'll just say context window. Let's say we have a chat, right? So this is our chat and this is our context window. So the context window is the amount of tokens or the amount of input you can put in a message that you send to a specific LLM. And when you're chatting to your Claude or ChatGPT, when you continue the chat, it's not as if it remembers what you were talking about. Every time you say something, the whole chat goes back into the LLM and the output comes out. That's why, when you start talking to it for a long time and you forget to create new chats, the output gets more and more inaccurate because, essentially you're just trying to get things out of it that doesn't remember anymore because it's just getting that single message. And I can kind of visualize this for you. So let's say I start the chat is this big, so the whole history can fit in my context window, right? And as I start typing, the chat gets bigger than the context window. Now, different models and different systems do different tricks here to try to kind of keep it smart and don't lose that initial context. Some of them try to kind of summarize everything, and then that summary is going to be utilized for the chat. But for an understanding, I think it's important to know that it will never be as accurate as it was originally until you hit the context window. After that, what happens is your context window will move. So your chat will forget the initial things and it will continue moving. And it will continue moving. And as it moves, it gets more and more inaccurate because it doesn't remember what you were talking about and it is making a whole bunch of assumptions around the topic. One of the other issues with this is that, if you've got a basic cloud subscription, these things run over very quickly, right? So one of our goals here is to optimize that usage. So, people without $1 million funds can actually utilize AI. And one way to do it is to be mindful of the tokens you're spending here. Once your chat gets too long, every time you send a message, you are sending the full context window and get the message back from it, right? So that is a lot of tokens, and that means that if you have a lot of long chats with your Claude, it will going to run out quickly. One of the things I realized is that when I used Claude or Claude Code work, I was running out very quickly because of the same exact reason. But now I utilize Claude Code on a daily basis because you kind of remember that you got to start a new chat. I haven't ran out of my Max subscription yet, which is great. So just keep in mind that the context window is something that you need to be mindful of. And at the moment, there's a race towards increasing the size of the context window. The newer models have larger and larger context windows, and that just makes them really smart in what they do. So going back to the skills, why do we need skills if we have this context window and chat and so on? Well, there's also another context that usually goes with your messages, right? So when you are chatting to your Claude has a memory of you. And to be honest with you, I don't fully know exactly what happens here, but I just know that, in that memory, it stores information about you. And essentially a part of that memory gets fed back to your LLM next to the context window, right? So let's say, I have a chat, and in the chat, we send a message. The message is essentially the context for the chat, and the memory will both try to fit into the context window and go to your LLM, right? As your system starts learning about you and starts storing memory, that memory gets larger and larger and larger again, right? So if every time you want to do something, the memory is huge and Claude or Claude Code is reading all of the memory, then again, you're wasting a lot of tokens and you're essentially just creating bias for your LLM, right? So I'll give you an example. At points, your decision making is because of certain factors, right? So, when you're between careers, finance is an important factor. And when you make decisions around purchasing things, you don't actually look at long-term vision, but more short-term, hey, can I pay for this or not? And that's essentially context that gets stored in the memory, right? And then let's say 2 years from now, you own a business, you want to invest in something, but your Claude memory still knows that that is your decision-making process. Then it will start to kind of think more short-term instead of long-term, and it will not help you make the correct decisions because it thinks that you're still in the same position that you were 2 years ago. Same goes with everything else, right? So if you're making a software, if you're doing whatever, I think it's important to be able to control that memory and the context that gets fed into the LLM. Okay, now let's go to skills and why we need skills. Well, in my understanding, skills are essentially managed memory. So skills are organized library of memories that you can utilize everywhere. So that would help a lot in saving these tokens because skills can only be called to your context window when they're relevant and when they're needed. Otherwise, only their name will be sent. That helps a lot in kind of keeping that control over your LLM and its output, and essentially making sure that you don't overfeed it things that it doesn't need to have. So let me give you a couple of examples around skills that I use personally that I think are huge in terms of productivity gain. I just got a new laptop, and I had the privilege to set up my new laptop with Claude Code. So a lot of things that previously were done manually now were done by Claude Code. And one of the things we did was to create a folder structure to keep things separately, right? So there's many projects that I'm working on, random software that I'm just publishing. There's kind of random posters that I'm downloading. There's just a whole bunch of things on a person's laptop, right? And I asked Claude Code to create a folder structure in the laptop, and that is actually saved as a skill. So folder map. And it contains the full list of all the folders and the relevant descriptions of what kind of files go in which folder. So these days, when I download something, I just go to Claude Code and I'm like, look at the last download. Claude Code reads it. It's like, hey, it's related to this project. Let me move it there. This is what I'm going to do with it. And we'll just continue the chat from there. The folder map sits within a skill that sits in Claude. Now, you might be wondering, well, how does Claude know that it needs to look at the folder map? We can rely on the description and the name of the skill. It's a way to go about it. But in order to be kind of like triple sure that it's always using the correct folder mapping, I actually got it to save a memory to itself. So we've got a memory in Claude Code that says that you have a skill called folder map that contains the directories in your laptop and what each of them is about. And that skill then is opened and used by Claude. And there's also a rule for Claude to keep that skill up to date. So if you're creating new folders, if anything is happening, that folder map stays up to date so that we don't lose anything or our downloads folder doesn't become a mess that it usually is. Another skill that I have stored in my Claude Code is a plan. So it's my 3-month plan. You can have a 3-month plan, a yearly plan, whatever works for you. But essentially, this is a skill that sits within Claude Code. And whenever I'm going to make a decision, or I think of something new and random that I want to do, I just ask it to go and update the plan. And then according to the plan, when I want to make a website or when I want to vibe code an app, it's already recorded in the plan. I can just open a new Claude Code session and say, hey, I want a website for X. Go look at the description in our monthly plan, in our 3-month plan. And Claude Code goes and reads the plan and it's like, okay, this is what we need to do. Let me go and create the website. Another skill that I have that is, most people have actually these days is a front-end design. So this skill helps my Claude Code design websites, right? So when I go and ask it to create a 3-month plan, when I have a new venture that I want to start, then I'm like, okay, we need a website for this. I'll just ask Claude Code to go and read the 3-month plan and then use the front-end design to create a website for us. The cool thing is, because of the folder mapping here, when I ask it to go and create that website, it will essentially go, read the 3-month plan, realize the name of the plan, go to the folder map, find the project, go to the front-end design the software, and store it all in the correct folder in the correct project. Let me go through the list of my other skills to kind of give you more examples here, because I think it's quite useful. I have a skill for my website. So I have a skill that is for commands website, and it keeps track of the visitors, the main information that I need on a regular basis that Claude can then go and access for me. And whenever I need to kind of look at those stats, instead of typing a long message of like, go check out my stats from X, Y, and Z, I'll just type in /command and the skill comes up. Claude reads the data, opens it up for me, and then asks me if it wants to save it to the log. Another one that I keep mentioning is the log. The log is what I use to kind of keep track of progress around different things. And I can just say, hey, like this is the update for today, go save it in the log. And one of the things that is happening that is quite interesting these days is that I'm finding that the log and the plan are talking to each other a lot. So the log gets updated, the plan gets updated based on a reflection on a log, and we'll just continue improving this system as we go along. There's a lot more skills that I have that I don't think will kind of fit in a video, but just to give you some more examples, I have one for my finances that manages all my money essentially, where things are going, what I need to do. I have the skill for my server, so it connects to my server and it upkeeps my server wherever I need it to. I have a skill called handoff. The purpose of handoff is to actually hand off tasks to other chats. So as I said, when the chat gets full here, the context window gets full here, you need to kind of find a way to optimize it. Well, in Claude Code, you actually have a setting to say, hey, if the chat gets full and the context window gets full, what I do at that point is I ask it to create a handoff, and it's just a skill that I built. So I'll just type in, and it creates a handoff.md in that folder. And then when I clear the chat, when I open a new folder, all my context, the important context is there, but the kind of random code in the chat that doesn't need to be there, it's not there. What else do we have here? That's essentially kind of the extent of the skills that I have currently installed. But that being said, I'm utilizing skills that are Finance Center. This is the global list of skills that we have installed on Claude. I'm noticing a lot of people these days are downloading a lot of skills, and there's GitHub repos that go viral. A couple of points here. So with skills, people can essentially instruct your Claude what to do, right? So there's a huge security risk here that there might be a skill sitting in your laptop that does front-end design, but because you haven't read it and you don't know what's in it, it might actually ask your Claude to send all the financial information back to the owner of the skill. I would be very mindful of the skills that I plan to utilize in my Claude Code. I wouldn't download too many. I wouldn't, potentially download public skills. Whenever I want to do something very specific, often creating my own skill is a lot more rewarding and gives you a lot more control over what to do with that skill. I hope this video was useful. There's going to be other videos coming up soon, but this kind of provides an overall high-level understanding of what skills are and what you can utilize them for. I plan to create a skill marketplace that gives you skills that are essentially the simple ones that, it's just a 10-line skill that you can copy and paste and then develop from there. And there's going to be, sort of questionnaires that I'm trying to extract from my current skills, including the plan and my finances, so that you can start up a new Claude Code chat, put that skill into it. It's blank, just a couple of questions, and Claude Code would actually run you through those questions to create that skill and customize it for you. There's going to be a lot of skills in the future coming up, and there's talk these days about the format of the skills. Currently, they're in Markdown files, so they're just text. But we have seen trends that people are starting to utilize the skills, HTMLs as skills, because you can add graphs, you can add connection points, and so much more. Yet to be seen what the industry decides, but that is where we are. Hope you found the video useful. New videos coming very, very soon. Have a great day.